Colleagues, welcome to the session on the new book, Introduction to Positive Autoethnography. I had the pleasure of meeting Professor Mayer last year when she came to a conference we had at the University of Greater Manchester. And I was able to take Professor Mayer in the car to meet a research colleague in a place called Huddersfield. And on the way back in the car, I asked Professor Mayer, where did you get your PhD? And Professor Mayer replied, which PhD? And I said, what do you mean, which PhD? Do you have two PhDs? And Professor Mayer said, no, Jerome, I have three PhDs. So we are in the presence of academic royalty here. I don't know anyone who has three PhDs. So it's a great pleasure to be able to speak to Professor Mayer about the new book. And I wonder if I could get us started, Claude, by asking, how did you get to the topic of positive autoethnography?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jerome. I'm still recovering from your introduction because usually I behave and I keep quiet, but yeah, that day in the car I didn't. But thank you so much, and it was such a pleasure meeting you in person last year at your conference, and I'm so happy we are doing the session together on positive autoethnography, because I know you have been mainly involved in positive autoethnography, and this is actually how I came across it, because I know you've been working especially with your students and different kind of students on positive autoethnography. And from my perspective, I've always been interested in autoethnography because in my very first PhD, I was looking at cultural anthropology, and I specialized in African cultures. And in the 90s, the work of Alice and Bochner were absolutely fabulous during that time. And everybody looked at their work. And being a student at this time myself, I looked at autoethnography, and this is what drew me to the topic at that point in time. And then I stayed a little bit with it, and I did some other research in between, and a lot of positive psychology research. And then 2 years ago, in 2024, your student Freda Gonot-Schopinski asked me to do a positive autoethnography with her, and I did. And this is how I reconnected a little bit to both of the topics at the same time. And this is how I came to write the book then later on with Freda. And I'm still sorry that you dropped out of the book. I know you are so busy, far more than I. So I was very happy to take over from you, and thank you very much for that again.
Well, thank you, Claude. So could you tell us, in your own words, what actually is positive autoethnography, and how do you define it? And how would you distinguish it from other forms of autoethnography?
Yeah, when we are looking at positive autoethnography, and I'm sure there are different kind of ways of defining it, but the way I define it, it is autoethnography from a positive psychology perspective, especially for me because I'm a psychologist. And I know that a lot of pragmatic autoethnography has also come into it, especially from Freda's side. And but looking at it, how I define it myself, I see it as a kind of autoethnography that uses the different waves of positive psychology, whichever they are. It could be positive psychology number 1 of Seligman, or it could be the one of Paul Wong, or even of Lomas, the wave of positive psychology 3, you know, with different approaches of how to define a positive psychology approach to autoethnography. And I think that really distinguishes it from other aspects of autoethnography and other parts of it, because we are using a special psychological theory, or at least a direction in psychology, to define autoethnography and to give us a kind of view onto autoethnographic experiences.
So could you say a little bit more about how it's different from, say, evocative autoethnography and analytical autoethnography?
Yes, sure. I found actually the session before ours very interesting because it was talked a lot about emotions. And I'm sure there are a lot of overlaps, especially with evocative autoethnography, because often very deep emotions are included. And I think maybe what really distinguishes it is the disciplinary approach to it, because I came from a psychological point of view, whilst evocative autoethnography, I think, is a little bit more not necessarily bound to the psychological discipline, but also coming from communication studies, bringing sociology in, different kind of aspects of emotions. And also often in evocative autoethnography, we see a lot of, struggles with emotion, challenging emotions, really deep emotions, where we take the reader into our depth of really difficult, maybe experiences even. And that can also happen in positive autoethnography, depending now on the wave of theories you take. But for example, in Seligman's approach to positive autoethnography, we look more at the positive, the happy aspects. With Paul Wong, we always have to take the suffering into consideration, because he says we cannot overcome the suffering or transform the suffering if we don't look at it. And so we have to also look at it. And there would be an overlap, in my opinion. But it would be really interesting to have a discussion on that further. And in the third wave of positive autoethnography, we always have a kind of systemic approach to it. We look at the autoethnographic case maybe from different perspectives and really try to take in different views. And I'm not sure if other approaches to autoethnography really do that as much.
Thank you for that, Claude. Now, I've obviously one of the lucky people who's read the book. And one of the things that struck me about the book was that you have put your own stamp on it, your unique stamp. And one of the things you talk about and you've developed, and of course, it becomes even more confusing because it's another two strands of positive autoethnography. I mean, people are just coming to terms with what positive autoethnography means. And then here you go, and you've developed intercultural positive autoethnography. Wow, what's that about?
Thank you very much, Jerome. Actually, it came out of my own confusion. What to do now with all the aspects of the intercultural aspects and the bicultural and the multicultural and the multicultural aspects and spaces we are often looking at in autoethnography. When we are looking at autoethnography in a classical way, we always looked at the self and the person within their environments, and also looking at the cultural aspects of the environments. But since I studied cultural anthropology, I was very familiar with that aspect. But my second major was in intercultural didactics. So I looked at how to really train people in the field of inter and cultural aspects, and also transcultural aspects, where we've got the overlaps of different cultural aspects that come together and we have to do something with them. And this is why I called it intercultural positive autoethnography, because I really wanted to look at the inter, where people come together from different cultures. It can be a narrow cultural definition, but it can also be a broader cultural definition. It's not even too much defined. It's quite an open concept. And at the same time, that was very important for me on the micro level, where individuals come together, have an interrelationship, for example, or an intercultural communication, and then have an intercultural positive autoethnography about these, meetings or the interactions together from different cultural points of view. But it can be an inter-relationship. It can also be an intra-relationship, where a single person looks at the different parts of their cultural identities, maybe even their language identities, their first, second, whatever languages, and how they interact within themselves and within, their personalities. And surely that can reconnect then to the cultural spaces we are moving within.
The other innovation, of course, Claude, was therapeutic positive autoethnography. And this is particularly interesting to me because one of the courses we run is an MSc in counseling and positive psychology. And we introduced a few years ago the possibility of students being able to do their dissertation using autoethnography. And that has become increasingly popular. And one of the things that strikes me about a lot of the positive autoethnographic accounts the students write is there's undoubtedly a therapeutic element. And when you write an autoethnography that is really closely linked to something important in your life, that's cathartic. So this edition is something which really excites me. So can you tell us a bit more about your conception of therapeutic positive autoethnography?
Yeah, thank you for this question and for your engagement in the concept, because it's my favorite one. And when I came to your conference and I heard and listened to the students and how they go about their writing of autoethnography, I could see they are actually doing what I tried to conceptualize for myself in the beginning, actually, because as a psychologist, I work surely at a university, but also in therapy. And how I started thinking about it more deeply was that I felt, and that is also what has been said before, surely, that writing about yourself and about your own struggles and trying to transform yourself and, grow somehow within your lifetime has a kind of therapeutic and a kind of healing effect on the self, but maybe even on the environment, because I work as a family therapist. So usually we look at a kind of, family system, or even beyond that. And I felt that writing autoethnography can not only be very healing for the self, but also for the community, for the family. And I started using it in my therapy, actually, first with single clients, but then surely also with myself together and the clients. And we wrote our own little pieces. And but also with family and about different kind of aspects. And one day I was reading an autoethnographic piece about a mother who had an adopted son who had an impairment. And throughout the 350 pages, I felt I was torn apart by becoming a therapist. And I wanted to tell this mother, what could you do different or work with her? On the other hand, I felt, oh, wow, there are so many emotions that are coming up within myself. I have to deal with them as well. And so I felt part of therapeutic positive autoethnography is also reading autoethnography, getting involved, dealing with your own emotions when you read about other people's lives. And, also, the third part was then looking at me as a therapist, and I felt so bad reading it, and I wanted to tell the mother, what could you maybe do differently from a mother's point of view myself, but also from a therapeutic point of view. And I had a professional identity and I had a personal identity, and I felt I have to differentiate between them to understand my own shadows, to understand my own growth opportunity. So that is also part of therapeutic positive autoethnography, because I struggled with a description of the autoethnographic case because it didn't end well. And being a positive psychologist, I would have wished so much I could talk to the person. I even tried to Google her, to try and talk to her about the case. And I felt this is why it needs a kind of transition maybe into something beyond the struggles. And this is where the positive part comes in again. Yeah, and looking at these different inner journeys of myself, I try to conceptualize therapeutic positive autoethnography, because I realized just reading about somebody else and about my wish to support someone, I need to look at myself, where's this wish coming from? And, develop also as a therapist. And I thought, wow, that can be a really good tool when I train other therapists in family therapy to use in my trainings for others, and surely for myself and for my clients as well. Sorry, that was a bit long.
No, thank you, Claude. That's really helpful. But I want to bring you back, if I may, to students, and want to ask you how you find using positive autoethnography in your postgrad teaching and supervision. Especially, I mean, you're in South Africa, you're working with very diverse cohorts there. I mean, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, first of all, I was really impressed how deep your autoethnographies go that you are supervising. And I was really, really looking into it far more since I've seen your students. I used it in comparison, maybe on a more superficial level. I'm teaching, for example, a course, cross-cultural psychology, each and every year. And in the beginning, I looked at intercultural competences and how to deal with them. And I always have a very diverse group of students in South Africa. And as you might know, since the end of apartheid in 1994, we are trying to transform the society. And I try to work with this in my cross-cultural class. So the topic of culture and race, and it's still called race in South Africa. I know people often feel offended about it, but depending on their origin. But in South Africa, we still talk about racial groups. It's even in our constitution, and they are still being classified into blacks, coloreds, whites, Indians, and Chinese. And often students struggle how to address people from the other groups because of the history of the country. And I started a few years ago and asked the students, you know what, I do not want anything else from you, but just an autoethnographic piece, either about intercultural communication you've had, or an intercultural conflict. It can be intracultural or intercultural. I want you to reflect upon your concept of culture, upon your concept of race, and on your concept of your social cultural surrounding, because it differs so much depending on, where you live and what part of a membership you share within the society. And it was the absolute hit in this class. And people said that was something that really moved them forward. And then I started to also try with the students to publish this work, to get them published and give especially South African students and Gen Z a voice in the international environment. And they really enjoy that. And I keep on doing that. And I believe that it really works extremely well because everybody comes from their own perspective. Nobody can feel offended about somebody speaking about themselves. And we can have, starts at least or beginnings of discussion points, how to maybe decolonize, how to deconstruct, how to reconstruct, or how to do something completely new based on their stories.
Now, I'm looking at Marcin here for this next question, because I mean, how adaptable are intercultural positive autoethnography and therapeutic positive autoethnography across cultures? Would they work in Poland, for example?
Are we asking Marcin?
Oh, I'm just, Marcin, I'm just encouraging you to think about how adaptable these approaches are for different cultures.
Sure.
But
Let's
Marcin
ask
wants
him
to say
first.
something. Marcin, please.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Jerome. I think there are many different answers to these questions. And at the moment, I think we can recall our shared experience of being in different worlds and coming together to England and finding ourselves as two autoethnographers, discovering very, I don't know how to say it, maybe unexpected way of discovering academic experiences connected with becoming professors and writing paper together. I don't know, maybe Claude can say something else about it, but this is very much experience, like cross-cultural experience, and different dimensions were in move here. So that kind of experience.
Thanks
Claude,
very much. Yes, I believe really positive autoethnography can absolutely work across cultures, because we are always coming and taking ourselves, how diverse it might be, and we are trying to understand ourselves. And people doing autoethnography usually have got a very high reflexivity. And when Marcin and I met in Manchester last year, we discovered that we had both been through the process of habilitation. I had been through it in Germany in 2012, and he had just recently been through it. And we talked about it, and suddenly we understood each other so well, because we had been through a very similar process within completely different cultures, different languages, different processes and universities. But we created a common understanding, and then we also wrote down our, it was a kind of intercultural positive autoethnography, because we tried to give it a reflective and transformative turn at the end of our challenging experience.
Yes, and that was kind of ideal of forming new academia through a dialogue, like transcultural dialogue, that was kept on different dimensions, or were practiced in different dimensions at the same time. So we were trying to find our ways to understand each other, like writing emails, exchanging emails, and writing, making notes on our own conversations and our past experiences connected with that conference in England, and also about the process of the Kafka process of being in a very difficult structure of being captured by academic systems or structures like that. That was quite challenging for both of us. I mean, being in the habilitation process both in Germany and in Poland. So we were trying to find meanings for ourselves and also for other people. And in this way, we were trying to, I think we can say, I don't know, Claude, if you agree with me, that we were trying to do positive autoethnography, kind of positive autoethnography, and that paper is based on that idea of positive autoethnography, very much so, in my opinion.
Absolutely, because we tried to deal with a kind of very powerful system of education and deal with this after we have dealt with this on our individual levels together, finding a community of similar thought, actually, and transformed our experience into, making academia, or let's say, trying to make academia an even better place.
Claude, I mean, people on the call may not be familiar with this process of habilitation, because certainly we don't have it in England. I don't think they have it in the States, probably not in many other countries as well. Would you just explain what habilitation is, and perhaps also say what happened at the end of your presentation and what you were told?
Yes, sure. Habilitation is a process that usually in several countries comes after the process of the doctoral degree. You usually spend 3 to 5 to sometimes 10 years in the process, and you write like a larger doctorate degree. Mine was 1,200 pages long. And after that process, you are going through a kind of oral examination that can take 2 to 4 hours, and you're being evaluated not only from individuals from your own discipline, but interdisciplinary. And after that, then you hopefully have managed and passed the habilitation process. So it's a bit of a broader degree, I would say. And afterwards, you get a kind of lecturing allowance or permission to lecture in a certain subject. Mine was psychology then.
And one of your examiners wasn't too kind to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Marcin and I, we had similar experience, a little bit different, but we both learned, I think, that often academia can be very harsh, very direct, especially when you are based in a culture of competition, of power, where people do not necessarily make it very easy to become part of an in-group. That is the part of becoming a professor. And we, through our positive autoethnography, we went through the suffering, through the challenges together, discussing it, how we experienced it, how we struggled with our emotions, and that both of us came in the end, if I understood us correctly, Marcin, came out of it by trying to make academia better, more friendly, and more kind also, and understanding the depth of the person trying to get a degree and not just seeing the certificate. Maybe that was our learning. I think at least I can say it was mine, and I understood Marcin in a very similar way.
Yes, I think if I can add just one simple statement, I think we work on two levels, and the first one was working with each other, so that dialogue was between me and Claude. And on the other hand, on another level, we were working for other people to share our experiences that were reflected by the process of being in a constant dialogue. And sometimes that dialogue was very intense. And I felt it like even in my body that Claude was saying something to me and was sharing something really important with me. So one of the conclusions of that paper was that we did something not only for ourselves, which was really important from the therapeutic way of dealing with really, really challenging experiences, but we were working on that paper. We were also we were trying to give something also for other people who were in that pretty much similar experience of being in the process of habilitation. It was quite challenging, as I said before. So, and it is, of course, much more complicated, but it's not time of discussing it thoroughly. I mean, that paper.
Okay, Marcin, thank you. Let me bring this back, if I may, then, to what we're really talking about today, which is your new book. I mean, one of the difficulties as a psychologist writing autoethnography is within the psychological community, it has virtually zero credibility within psychology, which makes it very difficult because a lot of us who write autoethnographically actually love it and we think it offers a great deal. So what do you think are the critiques of positive autoethnography, and how do you address them?
All right, so I think they are actually very similar to autoethnography in general. I mean, that we are talking about ourselves, that we don't have so-called objective measures and so on. And with regard to the positive, I think it is very often misunderstood because people think we are just looking at a certain aspect from one specific positive point of view. And they do not know that that is at least my experience, that we have got a huge framework underlying positive autoethnography with regard to the different waves of positive autoethnography. And surely this is a critique that positive psychology also has to deal with all the time, that it might just be a little part that we are looking too much at the positive and the qualitative one. And at the same time, we could also surely combine positive autoethnography with qualitative aspects, and we could also maybe quantify them more and do frequency analysis and so on if we wanted to. But I also think, Jerome, really, I believe the world is changing quite a bit. People have to look far more at themselves if they want to survive in the world in a kind of good way. And we see, looking at all of the increases, for example, in depression and so on, that I'm really very, very sure that the time of autoethnography, and not only of positive, but also of positive autoethnography, will come where people will look more into these tools because they are needed for self-reflection and for making more informed decisions sometimes. And I really believe our leaders should start with that first, looking at these kind of aspects. And we hope that one day we have got a bottom-up approach where it also comes to the top of psychology one day.
Thank you, Claude. What do you see are the future directions for the two elements that you have been involved in developing yourself, the intercultural and the therapeutic? How do you see those two elements developing?
Have I seen what developing? Sorry, I didn't get that.
Yeah, how do you see intercultural positive autoethnography and therapeutic positive autoethnography developing? I mean, these are in a sense your innovations to this newly developed area of positive autoethnography.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was so surprised when I came to the University of Greater Manchester and saw that you're actually doing what I'm doing. And there was my development, I saw we've got a lot of similarities which we can put together and also develop the concept further. I think it's a little bit early maybe to say the concept has developed. Obviously, when I look at the chapter that I've written a year ago, there might be different aspects which I would elaborate more, where I would be a little bit more in maybe philosophical depth and so on and so forth. But it was my first try to develop the concepts. And I know there is absolutely more development needed. And anybody who would like to join in developing these concepts, I would be really, really more than happy, especially from different kind of views. Because I mean, I can just look at it. I grew up in Germany from a kind of Western perspective. I lived 30 years in African context. I can bring that a little bit into it, and it fits so well with the positive aspects. But surely we need different people from different cultures looking at the concepts and developing them further.
If you were writing this book again, we say 10 years' time, what do you think you'd be doing differently?
Yeah, I think I would really look more, one of my hobbies is philosophy. So often I like to look at philosophical background theories. So maybe I would give it a better foundation, because at the moment it is a very practical approach and it came directly from my experience. And I think that is good for the moment. But to really establish a theory further, it needs far more deeper understanding of the underlying aspects of it. So I would maybe hope that I could have the chance to look more into philosophical aspects and develop the concepts a bit further with others together.
So this is an excellent book. I'd strongly recommend it to people. I mean, it is a follow-on from the original paper on positive autoethnography, which, as you say, was written by Frida Gunnar-Szupinski, Professor Mark Weeks, and myself. So it's lovely to see the book, and there's this wonderful series of papers in mental health and social inclusion on positive autoethnography with a number of very famous people talking about their backgrounds. So, Claude, would you be willing to take questions from the floor now, as it were, from the screen?
Sure. I mean,
coming up in the chat. So please, let's open the discussion. And who would like to ask Claude the question first?
Yeah, questions or comments, everything is welcome.
Floor is yours. Who wants to ask the first question or make a comment? A few people. You'll have to take yourself off mute if you want to say something. Vanessa, you're sort of hovering around there. Vanessa, yes, I thought so. Yeah, brilliant. Over to you, Vanessa.
Hi there, thank you so much. I'm having a bit of a fangirl moment, so you must excuse my high adrenaline. I've got the book. It arrived yesterday, and I absolutely adore it. In my ED at the moment, I'm my own single participant in my study, and my field is in doctoral journeys, and especially ED and professional doctorates. Part-time. And mine is on my journey and my experience of being diagnosed with ADHD 2 years ago that transformed everything for me and has been a real catalyst for massive things. So I've been through a lot of suffering with my doctorate and found it extremely difficult to write. And I've done a lot of therapy. I've done a lot of soul searching. I've done a lot of journaling. And so I also found, and I don't know, and this is part of my question, I don't know your views about Dick Schwartz and No Bad Parts and his versions of IFS. But I'm using symbiotic autoethnography, Liana Beattie's work, partly because of her temporality work, but also her polyvocality and the recognition of multiple voices externally as well as internally. And I thought that Dick Schwartz's work about part of me feels like this and part of me feels like that, and the protector and the manager, and I'm business background, so business is very relatable to me, and I love the systems approach that you have and the diagrams that you use, because that's helps me in my thinking as well. So thank you for those. So my celebration of what you're doing, I'm just so excited because I think there's huge work here to be explored. And the reason I mentioned about Dick Schwartz is because he is controversial in some corners. He has been dismissed by some in academia and in the psychology world and psychiatric world. And his intention is to make things more accessible to more people as well, which I think has to be a good thing. I'm also a coach, and I'm also very interested in helping people to navigate their path through their work, which is why my emphasis in my PhD, in my ED is about flourishing. So it's very much along the positive psychology route. And I've long followed Seligman and various other things, but I've been in business world rather than in psychology. So it's HR that I've been involved with rather than in psychology. So first of all, the point about Dick Schwartz, do you approve, disapprove? What's your views on him? And this worry, but also this opportunity of people like coaches adopting things like therapeutic methods, even though they're not necessarily trained and qualified in that area, to make it more accessible to more people. Sorry, that's a long one.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much. I love your excitement and also all of your different approaches you're using. So I think that is very important. And, you know, with regard to the accessibility of therapeutic and healing methods, I think it's absolutely needed, because we need to look at ourselves and deal with ourselves. And I really believe that we only know ourselves what is the best for us. And yes, we can get help from the outside, but then still we have to look at our resonance and how does it speak to us and so on. And I believe that to ethnography, and especially positive one, to work through the even trauma, to work with or talk with someone about these issues, you know, can really help to deal with it. So I'm absolutely fond of the idea to distribute it more, because we need to bring people into their own power and empowerment. So that is my first answer to your last question. And then you ask a lot about the parts therapy, or the dealing with the parts. And in family therapy, there's one direction that deals with it all the time, because our outside family is often represented in our inside parts. And so I have worked with it a lot. I like it a lot. I think it would be a great contribution to include it in therapeutic positive autoethnography. If you could write an article on that to just add on, you know, or make it part of therapeutic positive autoethnography, I believe that could be really something very, very good.
Thank you so much.
You know, no matter what other people think about it, as long as it comes from your inside, I think it needs a space in the space.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Vanessa.
Thank you.
On the therapeutic and coaching, probably the main person in the UK in this is Dr. Alex Howard, who interestingly used an autoethnographic approach to write about his therapeutic coaching. And you mentioned Seligman. Now, Seligman has a dislike of qualitative methods. But if you read The Hope Circuit, which is the story of his life, it's actually positive autoethnography, but don't tell Seligman that yet. So, another question, please. Thank you, Vanessa. Another question for Professor Mayer. Okay, I've got a hand up there. And Nelson, are you on mute?
Yes. So my question is, how do you see positive autoethnography contributing to social justice, particularly equity issues and inclusion? And then the second part is like, what gaps do you see in the field at the current moment?
You know, I really believe it can have a very, very big contribution, because just looking at South Africa and the development within the society, I do believe that we need new tools, or even old tools. I mean, they are not very new in autoethnography. So we've got these tools since a very long time, but not focusing on just itinerating our emotions, but transforming them to our personal growth, and also to our organizational growth, and to our societal growth, where we can really grow together into something that is better. And this is why I use it in my classroom, because I really believe it has got a big potential for changing inclusion within the classroom of my students. Because when they hear personal stories and about, you know, how people grew up and what they had or didn't have, and where they were coming from, and the regrets and whatsoever, they get empathy. And they can connect so much better and with each other. And yeah, I really believe that is part of becoming part of the other person's group and membership, and creating inclusion on a very small level. But I also believe I can only work on this very small level. It might be one day be used far more on bigger levels, or on organizational levels, and so on, in organizational autoethnography. And yes, it can create justice, because we have to understand what is justice for people from different kind of backgrounds. What does it mean? Where should it go? How do we create a common justice? By narrating our first not maybe so positive stories. And how do we go together through the suffering of the injustice experiences? And because sometimes I feel we talk about justice, but we do not really talk about what it means to the different people. What is now justice? And then for in a society of, I don't know, 60 million people, how do we create justice? We have to really become clear of what we are talking about. And this is why I think we can really look at these concepts. And also when we look at decolonialization, it maybe falls into it a little bit. I think just the term is very difficult sometimes to navigate. And can we not use positive autoethnography to create new terms together from different cultural point of views and have something new? Because I think the world needs something new and not go back to old terms and put a re or a d in front of it. And this is how I would think we could really use it if we could win more people to look at it or look at reality into this way.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you. And thank you for your question, Nelson. We just have time for one more question. Catherine Mary has had her hand up for some time. Her arm must be getting sore. Do you want to come off mute and ask us your question, please, Catherine Mary?
Hi, folks. Is the sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay. That was fascinating, Claude-Hélène. Thank you. I have a quick question about publishing and sharing work. Unlike Vanessa, who's done something very brave, I am not working with people anymore in groups. I'm at a point where I'm exhausted by it and have some health issues. Nothing too serious, but I'm minding myself. So I've been putting creativity. Has somebody got their mic on? There's a terrible sound coming through all the time there. Has anyone got their mic on, folks, that you could turn off, please? I've been writing a book, I blog, and I create socially engaged art exhibitions without involving loads of people now. I'm not clinically trained as a therapist, so my boundaries are shit. And that means that I take on lots of emotions and get unwell, and the empathy is scattered. So I've decided to pull back, and I wrote a book and published it, and to avoid Amazon and the big dominant multinationals, I got it printed here in Ireland, and that process was extremely expensive. So it's all very well and good to want to contribute and to evolve and to alchemize pain and suffering or experiences into something helpful. I love that. It seems I've always been doing that. But I have a broad question for everyone of like, where on earth to publish such creativity? Also, does anyone want to collaborate with a creative person and to do something together? And beyond academia, folks, which a lot of you maybe don't want to look or will not exist in, maybe you're happy within your particular space, I understand that. Do you see a way to bridge academia with the broader audience? I also have a website and blog, but I'm a little bit cagey at the moment and deciding where to go next. Few questions there, so any feedback on any of them would be great, and thank you.
Okay, Jerome.
A few words in response to Catherine Mary?
Yeah, sure. I really believe there is a huge request, to bridge academia and, the normal life. Absolutely. And I really believe there are also outlets for that. I mean, for example, okay, I can now only speak about maybe psychology, but psychology today often has these kind of academic content in very easy words included and expressed, for example. And I think there are also other outlets who would be very happy also in the art scene. And Jerome is very well published in this area. And I'm sure he has also got some different suggestions where to publish these kind of things.
Well, one of the things about getting published now is there are literally thousands and thousands of journals, and journals need papers. If they don't have papers, they don't have a journal. It's just finding the right one, Catherine Mary. There are lots and lots out there. So I see Tony was coming in there a second ago. We've got to, we've used our 50 minutes. So I think just to conclude this session, I want to thank Professor Mayer for coming along to share with us her new book on positive autoethnography. I want to thank Vanessa for being able to hold up a copy of it. Because as a reviewer of it, I only had an e-version. So there's the book. It is out there. So congratulations on the book, Claude. And I'm
Thanks
sure
very
it will
much.
make a huge contribution to the field. And Tony, thank you, please, for bringing us all together, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Take care.
Thank you very much, Prof. Jerome.
Thank you both.
Bye-bye.
Great session.
Thanks,
Great
everyone.
questions.